You're listening to the Study Podcast with Dr. Paul Wegner on Exodus. I'm your host, Tyler Sanders, and I'm here with Dr. Paul Wegner. He's going to give us the Hebrew word of the day.
All right, here we go. We've got actually two parts today to it.
Two parts?
It's all in one verse, though. It's in Exodus 19:5.
Okay.
And the first thing I wanted to show you, do you see the top part there in yellow? When you have a root, a verb, and you have the same root radicals, and it's a infinitive construct at the beginning, and then an imperfect, like we have in this structure, it's for emphasis. So when this goes through, it says, and now then, if you will indeed hear or indeed listen or indeed obey my voice. And so it's emphatic. And so it's kind of neat because you're using the same consonants, but it's in two different forms. But
this will be for several words.
It's any of them can do it. Yeah. So obey is a real common one to do it. Yeah. Okay, that's the first one.
And is that's for today, right?
That's the first part.
Okay, first part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then do you see at the end of that phrase there? That's the word possession.
Okay.
Okay. And it can,
up here. Yeah.
And it can mean something like treasure or something like that. But God often uses that term for Israel to refer to Israel. So it's like his treasured possession.
For his, it's his treasure.
Yeah. So I thought that's kind of neat. So it's sagula.
Sagula.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
so
cool.
That's our Hebrew word, but it was kind of neat in that it's talking about God's treasured possession. So he's telling us that Israel is his special chosen treasure.
Right.
So I thought that's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's cool. And it looks like you say here it only appears 8 times in the Bible.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And is it usually
almost always about
always.
Israel of God's possession? Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's really good to see that, I think.
Yeah. So I think we've got a good one.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk about the last part of Exodus today and hopefully finish up the book. But it's talking about the covenant on Mount Sinai. Remember, they went through the wilderness wanderings, all of that. They get, and there was quite a bit of time explaining of that. Then they finally get to Mount Sinai, and now the rest of the book is going to cover that. So like 20 chapters just on them being there, and they're making this covenant.
Yeah, it's a lot of instructions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what we've got. First of all, I wanted to show you that in Exodus 19:1, it says, in the 3rd year after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. So that gives you the time situation.
Yeah.
So they were, the first time they were wandering from Egypt to get to Mount Sinai, it took them 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Then they're gonna, after they go from Sinai, they're gonna take 40 years to wander and the rest of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought that'd be helpful for you. All right. Now they're gonna make this covenant, and as they do it, God is gonna make an offer for them that is amazing. Look what it is. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession. So that's the verse we already covered.
Yeah.
Among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So do you see what he's offering? He's offering them to make them a kingdom of priests.
Yeah.
Do you realize what's a priest? What does a priest do?
Kind of stands before the people.
Okay.
In front of God, right?
Okay, so he's the go-between?
Yeah.
So do you see what he's offering to Israel? He's offering to have Israel be the go-between between him and all
rest
the
of the
other
world.
nations.
Yeah.
So do you see, this actually gives you a good understanding what the Old Testament's all about, right?
Yeah.
So the way he was going to get his message to the world was to use Israel to be that light and let them know.
Which we see a lot of that idea in Isaiah, which we went through the whole book.
Yeah. And
not to just plug earlier episodes. But that's a big part of it, is we're seeing a lot of how they haven't necessarily done that, but that's their future.
Yeah. And here he's actually making the offer. And so and in a holy nation, I'm assuming that the stipulations that are coming later is how to make them
set apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of neat. All right. The people, on verse 8 says, and all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. Now, it says that's basically them agreeing to the covenant. But remember, notice they say, oh, yeah, all that he says we will do. How long did that last?
Right. Yeah.
Not very long.
really soon we have a huge example of how poorly they
the covenant or the golden calf. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the structure there.
Yeah.
Okay, then in verses 10 and 11 it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down to Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people." So basically, he's letting them know that when you're talking to God or when you're relating to God, you've got to be clean.
Yeah.
And so the idea of them washing their garments and preparing and all that, I think was a good illustration of saying, you don't just come before me as you are. You've got to get prepared to do that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was helpful. And then verse 19, "Then the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, and Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. And the Lord came down on Mount Sinai on top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up." So basically, you have this preparation for the covenant, and then Moses goes up to get the stipulations.
Yeah.
What you've got there is, because he makes it real clear in the next couple of verses that, okay, the people are not supposed to come up to the mountain. Remember, even if they touch it, or even if an animal touches it, was to be killed.
Yeah.
So the people are on the outer part of the circle. Then the priests were next, and then Aaron was able to come up at least part way with Moses, and then Moses went all the way to the top.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat. You saw the levels of holiness almost, and here's how far certain people could get to it. So it's kind of neat.
That is neat, yeah.
All right. Okay, then we've got, remember in covenants, there was often a historical prologue.
Oh, yeah, right.
This one's very short. It's only one verse, but look what it says. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." So he's basically, in one verse, he's basically summarizing what God has done for them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what a historical prologue was in these covenants.
Yeah.
It basically talked about their relationship and how they were supposed to, God has done for them, actually.
And that becomes such an important part of just their own narrative.
Yeah.
Going forward, that's like a fact that
Exactly.
we get referred back to all the time
Yeah.
throughout the rest of the Old Testament and in the New Testament too, that this is what he did.
Yeah.
This is what God did.
And it makes perfect sense. And it often will remind them about what happened in the Red Sea or the Red Sea.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Then this was followed by the stipulations. We know them as the 10 Commandments, but that's basically what a covenant would have.
Yeah.
And here you've got them. No other gods, no idols, no treating God lightly, remember Sabbath. So those 4 are basically God's relationship, or our relationship to God.
Yeah.
Then the next 6 are our relationship to other people.
Yeah.
So if you're going to follow my covenant, these are the things you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of neat. Remember when the scribe asked Jesus, what is the greatest? The most important law, and he says, "Love the Lord your God." So basically, he's summarizing those first 4 covenants or commandments, and then the next one, and the second one's like it, love your neighbor as yourself. He's summarizing the next 6.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of neat. He's in 2 verses, he can actually summarize the whole law.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think that kind of also defines how you love your neighbor and how you love God.
Exactly.
You can see, the elements of that are found in the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought that's a good way to see that. All right, then it says, "For all the people perceived the thunder and the lightning and flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, and when the people saw it, they trembled and stood at a distance. Then they said to Moses, 'Speak to us for yourselves, and we will listen, but do not let us God speak to us, or we will die.' And Moses said to the people, 'Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin.'" See, I knew the logic of having God be up there and the thunder and all that, and them being afraid, but he actually gives the reason why that test is there, so that they are afraid to then disobey him. And I thought, well, there's some logic there, isn't it? I mean, if you in the Old Testament, often awe and reverence and fear are all kind of intermixed. And I think what he's doing is he's saying, well, if you fear, then maybe you'll be very careful how you react to me. And I think that's kind of the logic of why he did this.
Yeah.
Because, you understand it shows how glorious he is and all that.
Yeah, there's a demonstration of power and stuff. Yeah.
But the logic is so that they won't disobey him.
Yeah.
So It worked for a little while anyway.
Yeah.
No, I think it's funny that they then try to undo that. So here's God doing that, and they're saying, "Oh, now you speak to us, Moses, instead of us, or it'll kill us."
Right.
Well, that's the whole thing. God wanted them to do that. Now they're trying to undo what He's doing.
Yeah.
So it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding
That's
between all of us and God.
That's right. Okay, then chapters 20 through 23 is often called the covenant code. And basically it says, 1 says, now these are the ordinances which you are to set before them. And then it's going to go through. And some of these are kind of neat. Okay, so you've got a male slave is first. And notice that the Hebrew male slave could go free after 6 years. But then the female slaves were not to go free. And I think the reason was because in the Old Testament, the women were to be taken care of. And so I'm assuming that the reason the female slaves weren't to be let go is because they were always supposed to be cared for and
Somehow connected
protected.
to a family.
Yeah. And then injuries, I thought some of these were, so if he strikes him so he dies, basically it's capital punishment, okay? But if it's accidentally, they flee to a city of refuge.
Yeah.
So we'll learn, remember we talked about that, actually we're going to talk about that when we get to Judges. That's covers that. Yeah. But then Exodus 21:14 says, if, however, a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor, so to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar that he may die. See, so it sounds like this is premeditated and really thought through how you're going to kill your neighbor.
It's murder.
Yeah.
All right.
And then God says, well, now you're going to be removed from my altar so that you'll end up dying. I'm assuming what that means is that then you couldn't offer sacrifices and it would basically separate you from God.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's what it's getting at.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's something. All right, stealing was another thing it talked about. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. And I thought, ooh, wouldn't that stop most of stealing? You know, if you knew you'd get caught, or even if you didn't get caught, but you knew that if you did, you'd have to pay 5 times more.
Yeah, way more than what you took.
Yeah, and now look, I thought it was interesting also that oxen are more, you have to do twice, even more than if it's a sheep.
Yeah.
And I thought because an oxen is bigger, right?
Yeah.
So that means you got to purposefully somehow steal, figure out how to steal this thing.
Yeah.
And if you do, that's going to be even more damage to the person it's stolen from.
Right.
So I think that was interesting that he now compensates for that you got to pay even more if it's something like an oxen. And remember, oxens were usually used to plow their field.
Right.
So it's something that's just crucial for the farmer to have.
Yeah.
And then like the next one, if a thief is caught while breaking in and struck so that he dies, there'll be no blood guiltiness on his account.
On the person who strikes him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be like self-defense or something like that. Yeah. All right. Then number 3, if the sun has risen on him, there will be no blood guiltiness on his account, meaning he's lived now, but he still has to make restitution. And if he owns nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So that'd be like, there is something called debtor's prison, and I'm assuming that's
Something
the kind
like
of
that.
thing it was. Yeah. And then if what he's stole is actually found in his possession, whether an ox or donkey or sheep, he must pay double. So because the logic is he still gets the animal back.
The original one back.
Yeah, and 2 more.
And I guess he hasn't profited on it either.
Yeah. In fact, all of these are showing that, right?
Yeah,
if you steal, you're definitely going to have to pay if you get caught.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, next one. If a man lets a field or a vineyard be grazed bare and let his animals loose so that it grazes another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. See, that's if somebody's let their animals out and it destroys your field or your vineyard, then you've got to give of the best of your field to them. So that's logical again. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Or if a fire breaks out, spreads to a thorn bushes so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field itself is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. So again, the person who owns the fields lost all that crop, and now the person who started the fire has to pay for that.
Even an unintentional fire because of the damage. Yeah.
So notice basically what's going on is that if somebody steals or you've done something that causes somebody else to lose property or value or something, then you have to make restitution. So see, it seems very fair and back today people steal and they don't ever expect they're going to get caught.
Sure, yeah.
Back here, they're going to make sure that if you do get caught, you'll never do it again, or it's certainly not going to benefit from it.
Right.
So I think that's important.
Well, and they're showing how to live with other people.
Yeah.
It's this kind of society rules, and I think that's there's an interesting question of responsibility in there, and responsibility to your neighbors, so that even if you're not intentionally trying to hurt somebody, when something has happened that's impaired their ability to, feed their family, make money, then you're responsible. You kind of owe them an amount to get them back on their feet. We're just so different, I think, from today when we think of like insurance and stuff, where sometimes there's even incentive to, commit fraud or whatever to try to get money out of an insurance company. I mean, we're very singular in a lot of ways now, and this is such an interesting way because really we're talking about kind of building a nation, you know, like these are the rules that you're going to have to be able to follow to live with each other.
Yeah. The next one's kind of interesting too. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, and it is stolen from the man's house, or if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. Okay, so that's a lot like some of those other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. If the thief is not caught, then the owner of the house shall appear before the judges, and that's the word Elohim. And I'm not convinced it's actually judges. I think it should be before God, because a judge is not going to really know whether this guy actually stole it or not.
Yeah.
But if you take him to God, God is going to know, and God will be the ultimate judge for him.
Right.
So I actually think that's probably more correct to determine whether he's let his hand on his neighbor's property.
Yeah,
so
there was no thief, essentially.
Yeah, and he didn't get caught.
Yeah.
So I thought it's interesting. There's several times something like that happens, and some translations do call it before the judges, but I actually think it makes more sense to take it before God.
Yeah.
So, all right. There's a whole bunch of various laws. If a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. Now, that would be normal. You'd expect a dowry to be paid. But the next one is really interesting. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry, but he won't get her. I thought, think about that. If your father thinks this guy is such a bad husband that he would never treat her right and stuff like that, the father can say, okay, you paid the money, but you don't get her.
Right.
I thought that was really a good way to take care of something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. You should not allow a sorceress to live. I thought, wow, that's
pretty to the point.
Pretty strong too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whoever lies with an animal shall surely be put to death. See, some of these things are just so wrong in God's eyes that it's just you do away with
There's
them.
no circumstances in which it would be appropriate or something. Yeah.
He who sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be utterly destroyed.
Yeah.
See, God was trying to make sure that no one, that he's given these standards, and he's saying, okay, if you want this covenant with me, this is how you're holy, and if you're going to be holy, this is how you'll be an example to these other nations.
Yeah.
So he's got some what I thought, they sound really strict, but I can see why they are now.
Yeah.
So I thought that was helpful. All right, 34:1. You shall not bear false witness. You do not join your hand to a wicked a man to be a malicious witness. When it says join your hand, I think that's a handshake kind of thing to make an agreement to go against somebody.
Yeah.
You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. I thought that was kind of interesting. The masses can often be wrong, and it's saying you don't do that.
Don't follow that.
Yeah. And so he's basically saying, stick to what I've told you already. Don't follow all of those.
Right.
Yeah. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute. I thought that was interesting. I expected it to say, don't be partial to a rich man.
Yeah.
He's the one that can pay you back, and so that's what I expected, but it's not what it says. And I think that's the whole purpose for it. So you shouldn't be partial to a poor man or a rich man, but the poor man you wouldn't expect to be partial to. So I think that's why he said it that way, is to say, who in their right minds would be partial to a poor man? But under my structure, you are fair to them too.
Yeah, right.
So I thought it was interesting the way he said it.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Okay. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him.
Yeah. You can't just claim it or something.
Yeah, and back to you got to live with these people, right?
Yeah.
If you see a donkey or one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it with him. I thought that. So even be kind to your animals of the neighbors. That even if you don't like them, you take care of their animals.
Yeah.
I thought that's good. All right. Sabbath. You shall sow your land for 6 years and gather its yield, but on the seventh you shall surely let it rest and let it lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
So basically, it's giving the logic of our country has handouts. This is not a handout. This is you still got to work for your food, but you don't stop them from going after that seventh year. That's allowing the land to go fallow.
Yeah.
Let the needy have it so that they can live.
Yeah.
So I thought that was helpful. And whatever they leave, the beasts of the field may eat. So even God's taking care of the animals.
Yeah.
You are also to do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. So all of those things were there were common staples.
Yeah.
So it says you do it on all of them. 6 days you are to do your work, but on the seventh you shall cease from your labor, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female slave as well as your stranger may refresh themselves. Notice it didn't say, so that you could refresh yourself.
Right.
But it's so your animals and everything, that'll also happen for you.
Yeah.
But also everything you own will all that.
And probably most likely the people and the animals doing the hardest.
Yeah.
labor.
Well, that's probably true too.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. Then it's got 3 times a year you shall celebrate a feast to me. You shall serve feast of unleavened bread. Then for 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you. At the appointed time in the month of Aviv, that's their first day of their new year. For in it you came out of Egypt, and none of you shall appear before me empty-handed. So they're supposed to bring a sacrifice or a gift to him. You shall also observe the feast of harvest, of the first fruits of your labors, from what you sow in the field. Now that's interesting. Notice that's the first fruits. So that means you celebrate your harvest before you ever have a harvest. Yeah, and then it has a feast of ingathering, which is at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So you're doing it before you ever get it, giving God the first fruits. So in faith that he's going to supply the rest of it.
Right.
And then you do it at the end. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord God. See, and I thought that the logic of that, I think, is then somebody is never going to get too far away. Like if they get a weird view or something like that, 3 times a year, you've got to come back to God.
We gather together.
Yeah. And so that if you have a weird view, then somebody's going to help correct that, I would think.
Yeah.
So I think there's part of that logic too. Okay, then conquest of the land. Behold, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. So here's part of this covenant is that he's going to take them to the land too. Okay? Be on your guard before him. Obey his voice. Do not be rebellious toward him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, since my name is in him. I think what that means, he has my authority. So this angel that's leading you better not disobey him because he's got my authority in him. Yeah. Okay, but if you truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. So he's promising that if you follow my covenant, I'll get you into the land and give their land to you.
Yeah.
And that's all those little, we often talk about Canaan as being the land of Canaan, but apparently it had all these little groups of people in it too.
Yeah.
And we know the Jebusites basically controlled Jerusalem. So it's more like pockets of these in all the land of Canaan.
Well, and it's always important to keep this in mind, which it kind of slipped mine for a moment there, but we have like these instructions coming about how to care for the land. It was before they had it.
Yeah.
That's
true.
That's kind of an interesting position to be in because you wouldn't even have had the experience to say, we can do that. We can not on the 7th year.
Yeah.
It's fine for us to give it up basically and let people,
Yeah.
use it. But like, if you haven't ever done it before, you don't have it. I mean,
Yeah.
that could be a scary prospect,
Yeah. And then to tell you that he's sending an angel to take care of you on the way, that's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah.
And that's the only place that I know of that actually talks like this. Often it talks about God going with them and all that.
Yeah.
But he actually gets real clear here and says, I'm sending some angel, or at least an angel, to lead you into the land to protect you.
Yeah.
I thought that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So that's that. All right, I will drive them out before you in a single year. So he actually lets them know it's going to be fairly quick, that the land may not become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. See, he even gives you some logic that if it happens slowly over time, what could happen is the land can go desolate and animals take over.
Yeah.
He says, I'm not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
I will drive them out before you little by little until you have become fruitful and possess the land. I will. So it basically is interesting. He's going to take parts of the land so that as you grow, you can actually make sure you can keep the land and manage it. Yeah. I will fix your boundaries from the Red Sea, so clear in the bottom, to the Sea of the Philistines, which would be the Mediterranean Sea, because remember the Philistines lived on the shores of the coast of the Mediterranean. Okay, and then from the wilderness to the Euphrates. So the wilderness. Oh, in fact, I got a picture here. So the first one is from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean.
Oh, yeah.
Then from the wilderness up to the, and I didn't even get all the way to the the Euphrates. But that gives you the big picture of what the land entailed.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So there's the verse that actually tells you that. All right. The people agree to it. So in chapter 24, they say, yeah, what you said we'll do. Yeah. Then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do. Moses wrote down the words of the Lord. Then he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with the 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's basically saying, that's a covenant stipulations, they're agreeing to it, and now the altars are often to remind them of that,
represent
stuff like
it.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then verse 7 says, and he took the book of the covenant, read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, we will be obedient. Again, they said that. So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words.
Yeah.
So the idea, remember in Hebrews, it talks about without the shedding of blood, there's no covering. And my understanding is that this is to make sure they know a life has to be given when stuff is like this is happening. A covenant is made. In a normal ancient Near East, it would be an animal or something like that. Here, I assume it was a sheep or something like that to remind them a death of an animal because this covenant was made.
Yeah.
So, okay. Then Moses then goes, the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and remain there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the law and the commandment which I have written for their instruction. So basically that's when Moses goes up and gets these 10 commandments. Okay. Now you know it's coming next, don't you?
That's it. Yeah.
All right. So he's also, while he's up there, he's also going to give them specifications like offerings for the tabernacle. They were supposed to raise a contribution from me. Every man whose heart moves him shall raise a contribution. And then he talks about the ark, tells her exactly what it's supposed to look like and all of that. I've got a picture kind of up here to give you some clue as to what it looks like. Yeah. The part that I thought was interesting, you shall overlay it with pure gold inside and out. You shall overlay it, and you shall make gold moldings around it. And then remember, it's got these 2 cherubim on top. So you've got that part. Then you make a table of showbread of acacia wood also. And then once again, it's going to be quite big. So, and it's going to be made of gold. So you've got a picture of there. And then the lampstand over on this side, you've got a picture of that. So all those are kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But it's all of it is in gold. So I thought, man.
And very precise.
Yeah.
There's a lot of...
You're right.
A lot of instructions of how it should, the kind of materials it should be made out of, and this kind of continues
and
on
the
a lot
size
of,
and everything.
Yeah.
Then I'd kind of summarize. You've got the curtains, of goat hair and stuff like that. It told how big it was supposed to be, the veil and screens and all that. Now it said the length of the court shall be 100 cubits. So if a cubit is a foot and a half, that's going to be a pretty big area.
Yeah.
All right, and 5 cubits 50 cubits wide, and then it talks about what the things are supposed to look like that holds the curtains things. All right. Then you've got garments for the priests. It talks about the ephod that the priests wore in the front, the breastplate, then a robe, the turbans and tunics, consecrating them, and the priests for the food for the priests. So it goes into all those specifications too.
Yeah.
Then we've got we've even got the altar of incense and all of those. But then chapter 31 was interesting in that it talks about the craftsmen and who are going to have the wisdom to do this.
Yeah.
But then we've got that covenant. I think I've got one more here. Oh, there's a picture of what the breastplate would look like. So you've got the 12 stones, and so that would be that ephod probably, and then the breastplate's the thing underneath it, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. Aaron and his sons shall eat the flesh of the ram and the bread. So it's actually making sure that you know that the animals were supposed to be, you don't know, often think of a burnt offering as just being totally burned up, but it's how the priest got fed too.
Right.
So that you got some of that. Then the altar of incense. Okay. All right. Now here's the golden calf. I'm going to read just a little. Now, when the people saw Moses delayed from coming down the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, "Come now, let us make a god who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." No, they know where he is. They know that so it's been a long time. I agree with that.
Yeah.
But you see the smoke on there, so you know he's still up there.
Yeah.
It's just funny that, we don't know what's happened to him.
Yeah.
But I also, when it says, come and let us make a God who will go before us, I don't think that that's exactly what it is. Do you see this picture over here? See, the God is usually on the back of an animal.
Oh, yeah.
And the animal is usually like the throne. So I actually think what they're basically saying is, let's make kind of a throne, and then this God will have to come, and when we lead the animal off,
He'll be with us, kind of.
Yeah, he'll be going with us.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that's what, I don't think they were getting rid of God all of a sudden. I think what they want to do is they're impatient. They want to get going.
Interesting.
So I think that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. And especially in the ancient Near East, bulls were often thought to be the thrones of their gods.
Right.
So I think that's what's happening. Then in verse 11, I thought that after that happens, then Moses goes up and prays for the people, pleads for them. Yeah. So Moses entreated the Lord his God and said, "O Lord, why does your anger burn against your people, whom you've brought out from the land of Egypt with a great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak, saying, with an evil intent he brought them out to kill them in the mountains and to destroy them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and change your mind about doing harm to your people."
Very interesting argument.
But it is a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because God does care what other nations think about him.
Yeah.
Because if they think he's a cruel God or something like that, they won't worship him.
Right.
And he doesn't want to give these nations any reason to not be willing to worship him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he even goes back to the patriarchs and says, whom you swore by yourself to say, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heavens. And in all this land which you have spoken, I will give to your descendants, and they will inherit it forever. So the Lord changed his mind about the harm which he was about to do to his people. Now, that the Lord changed his mind makes it sound like this is a wishy-washy God, and he doesn't know whether he's going to do it or not.
Yeah.
My understanding, and that's where things like the openness of God and stuff that, theology have come about.
Yeah.
My understanding is that God knew what he was going to do, but he's working with Moses, isn't he? He wants Moses to care enough about these people that he pleads for them.
Yeah.
And then if God at the end of that would have said, nope, I'm going to destroy him anyway.
Right.
Well, then you knew this is a cruel God. Even when they repent, or even when Moses pleads for him, he's not going to change his mind.
Right.
But I understand it's better to start working with Moses. So now Moses learns that this God does care and he does love them.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on here, and not what some people have said.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So he got this forgiving them, and I think he does it. But now if you will forgive their sins, and if not, please blot me out of your book which you have written. That actually tells you that there's a book that God has got his children in.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that throughout the Old Testament several times, and even into the New, right? But it's interesting that he makes that very clear. So Moses understood that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out him out of my book. So notice he says, you're not going to die, or you're not going to be blotted out for somebody else. You're going to be blotted out for your own sins.
Yeah.
So that, again, that makes it real clear. And later on, you're going to hear that very clearly in some of the prophets too.
Yeah.
Okay? But now go lead this people where I told you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day I will punish, when I punish, I will punish them for their sins. And the Lord smote the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron had made. Notice they don't get off, do they? They're not going to be punished immediately, but they do get punished.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they learned.
Yeah. I mean, it's a super interesting story. It's very unexpected.
Yep.
It's also kind of, I mean, not just unexpected because of the calf. And so seems like such an obvious mistake to make.
Yeah.
But it's kind of in the middle of a section that's very instructional, and then we get this narrative.
Yeah.
It's very much a story. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of a different voice.
Yeah.
And we're seeing kind of people interact and stuff, which is such a kind of a thematic, or maybe not like a thematic shift, but like a genre shift.
Okay.
Right in the middle of this. That's a little bit. It's not jarring, but it definitely calls your attention to it. It's important.
And do you see what you in just those couple of verses, do you see what you learned about God? There's this book that he's writing, that he's keeping his people in, that you can't be punished for somebody else's sins, but you can for your own sins.
Yeah.
So you've learned actually a lot about God in just those couple of verses.
Yeah.
So I thought that was helpful.
Yeah.
All right, Exodus 33, then the Lord spoke to Moses, depart, go out from here, you and the people whom you have brought up from the land of Egypt to the land I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it. I will send my angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey. They even tell them how good it is. But I will not go in your midst, because you are an obstinate people, and I might destroy you on the way. This is, in my mind, this is a very interesting passage.
Yeah.
So God says, okay, Moses, you can take them. I'm sending my angel. You can go, and you'll get to the land, and you'll get in there and everything. Now, look what Moses says. The Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just like a man speaks to his friend. That's another passage that talks about how Moses is different than any other prophet. So, all right, when Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Now, what you're going to find out later, I think it's next. Yeah, look at what Moses says. Then he says to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here. For how can it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people? Is it not by your going with us, so that we and I and your people may be distinguished from all other people who are on the face of the earth? See, I like this about Moses. If I was, in fact, this is going to cost Moses a lot, right? What God just told him is, in the verse before this, that he'll make it to the promised land and you'll get there and everything. The way it is and the way it works out, he's not going to make it, is he? Because he's going to be punished before that, so that he won't ever get into the land. So if he would have taken the first one, he could have got to the land, but not had God with him. And he's willing to say, I don't want that. I'd rather not. He doesn't know he's not going to make it to the land, but the way it works out, he's not going to go, but his presence will be with him.
Yeah.
I think that's an extremely interesting passage.
Very much so,
Yeah, and helpful.
Yeah.
That's when then Moses says, I want to see your glory. So then Moses says, I pray, show me your glory. And he says, I myself will make all my goodness pass before you. I will proclaim my name, the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to you. I will be gracious, and I will show my compassion on you, and I will show you compassion. But he says, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. See, I think what that's saying is nobody can actually handle that. God's grace or God's glory is so great that if you actually saw his face, a human body couldn't take that. So that's what I think he's saying. Because no man can see me and live. I think what that means is you just couldn't tolerate it.
Yeah.
So he gives Moses as much as he can without harming him.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. All right, so then they have the 2 tablets. Those get replaced, and then he has to renew the covenant again because now they broke it.
Right.
Now it has to be renewed.
Yeah.
And he said, now if I found favor in your sight, O Lord, I pray, let the Lord go along in our midst. And even though the people are so obstinate, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your possession. See, that was the promise before. Yeah. Then God said, behold, I'm going to make a covenant before all your people, and I will perform miracles which you have not been produced in all the land or any other nation. And all the people among whom you live will see the working of the Lord, for it is a fearful thing, and I'm going to perform with you. I thought, so here's God saying, okay, you've asked for it, Moses. I will now go with you, but you're going to see my glory as I do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do some great miracles. And we
stuff
know,
no one's seen.
Yeah, and we now see that, as they go along, the manna, the water from the rocks, stuff like that. He says, you're going to see stuff you've never seen before, Moses.
Yeah.
I thought that's neat. All right. Then we got the Sabbath emphasized, the tabernacle workers, and the gifts received. The second one I thought was so funny, that gifts received. Remember, he had told them to bring gifts so that the ark could be made and tabernacle. Right. All right. So Moses issued a command, and a proclamation was circulated throughout the camp, saying, let no man or woman any longer perform work for the contribution of the sanctuary. Thus the people were restrained from bringing any more, for the material that they had was sufficient and more than enough for all the work to perform it. Wow. I think that is amazing. So they were given so much that that Moses had to stop them and say, we can't take any more. We've got enough to do the whole job. I bet that never happens in a building.
I know. It's so interesting. You wouldn't necessarily expect that with some of their other behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
So I thought that's good. And most building, when they have programs and stuff like that, they never have to stop the people from
decades.
giving.
Decades of work to
that's right.
pay off the gym.
All right. So then we got the tabernacle constructed, the priestly garments made, and the glory fills the temple. So that's kind of how the book ends. We've got here, then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the sons of Israel would set out. If the cloud was not taken up, then they would not set out until the next day when it was taken out. So it's going to guide them all the way. So once the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, then it's going to be their guiding thing of the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So I thought that's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is.
And that's kind of how it ends. Exodus ends with this beautiful picture of God's glory filling this tabernacle.
Yeah.
So, all right, now we got some concluding things.
Yeah.
Okay, God chooses to make Israel his people to be a light to the rest of nations, and that's like a priest being that. And I thought, man, that actually is brilliant, isn't it? A way that God was going to make other nations know about him was to use a nation and show them what it could be like if they live for him.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's actually a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. God gave the stipulations of how the nation should respond to be a good example to their God. And that's what all those stipulations were, love the Lord your God, follow him, don't make any images of him, but then be good to your neighbor. Don't rip him off, don't steal from him, all of those kind of things. So I thought that was good. The tabernacle was the representation of the presence of God for the Israelites. So as it moved, he was moving with them. And so it was a constant picture of God's presence in their midst.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant too, because he knows we need stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sacrifice helped them learn that sin had consequences. A price had to be paid. And that's even when they made the covenant, an animal had to die to give that blood there.
Right.
So the Israelites broke God's covenant, but it could be repaired. I thought that was helpful. But then you had to start again and reiterate, do it again and say, okay, you broke it, but it can be mended.
Yeah.
And I thought that's helpful, isn't it? Because we often break it.
Right.
So, and then Moses would not leave unless God went with them. this will cost Moses something. In
Yeah.
fact, virtually almost.
Yeah.
He wanted to get to that promised land
Right.
so bad. In fact,
Right.
Deuteronomy talks about how he almost begs God to keep doing it. And at one point, God says, enough.
Yeah.
I've had enough of your begging. No more. Don't ever speak to me of this again. It's cute. But so do you see, even the book, which I bet you expected that Exodus was going to be really boring. But actually, it's got some
No.
really neat things in
Yeah.
it, I think, and
Yeah.
and helpful things to help us learn about this God.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just like we kind of saw earlier, like one of the core narratives in Exodus, of the actual Exodus, like leaving Egypt, kind of becomes a defining
Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
for Israel.
It does.
A potent reminder of what God has done for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like it that he uses a covenant because they would have been very familiar with a covenant
Yeah.
and they knew it would have a historical prologue
Right.
and stipulations and then the blood of an animal had to be shed. So it all of those things would fit right into stuff they already knew
Yeah.
and it would make sense to
Well,
them.
even for us, for readers today, if you're reading in order, Genesis and then Exodus, you're going to see,
Yeah.
you'll be at least somewhat familiar with the idea of the covenants too and how they function, and
Yeah.
the previous covenants God had made with his people, and this
right.
kind of shift is basically how it develops
Yeah.
in Exodus.
Yeah. Well, I hope that was a good one.
Yeah, it was really good. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
finished Exodus,
I figured
yeah.
we'd better not spend too much time in Exodus.
And next is Leviticus. Is
It
that right?
is. Yeah, we'll see what we can do with it.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us.
I so appreciate you doing it. All right, bye-bye.